Combinations are the secret extra letters of the English alphabet, and it is impossible to learn how to read or write English without mastering them. But they go completely ignored by the standard object letter learning things, which only teach the 26 very conventional pronunciations of the 26 standard letters. Flaw number 2 is that excessively focusing on the letter sounds that begin words imposes a sort of artificial hierarchy of importance among the letters. In fact, I would say that this is one of the first things about the alphabet you learn as a kid, this idea that some letters are more important than others because more words start with them. So as part of my research into this topic, I did a comprehensive audit of 100 randomly selected ABC things designed for children. We're talking posters, we're talking puzzles, we're talking books, we're talking mats, we're even talking those horribly creepy YouTube videos they make for babies. And after tabulating all of the data, I made this. This is the world's most cliched ABC poster as determined by science. All of the objects on it are objects that my research determined were the ones statistically most likely to appear on any ABC thing. And you can see that I made the objects all different sizes based on just how statistically common they were. So the apple is really big because I found that in over 70% of all alphabet things, they use the word apple to represent the letter A. And this pig is really small because even though pig was statistically the most common object used to represent the letter P, this was only true in less than 20% of the cases. So anyway, according to my research, children are consistently taught that the 4 most useless letters are A, E, U, and Z, because most alphabet things imply that there are only 4 words that begin with these letters: apple, elephant, umbrella, and zebra. The 4 most useful letters, in contrast, are T, G, B, and J, since most children's toys will expose kids to a broad diversity of different words that begin with those letters. This is, of course, nonsense. A, E, and U are actually some of the most useful letters in the English language because they are vowels, and basically every word has at least one of them. This is very much the case with the letter X as well, which I think a lot of kids learn to imagine as like the most stereotypically useless letter, since the only words that begin with it are xylophone and X-ray. And frankly, X-ray really shouldn't even count. That's like saying U is for U-turn. You can't just use the name of the letter in a word. Although using X for xylophone isn't really that much better if our goal is to teach children all of the standard pronunciations of all of the letters, since xylophone is one of those words where X makes a Z sound instead of its standard X sound in words like fox and box and locks. But in any case, X is a very important letter that is used in lots and lots of very common words, so portraying it as the alphabet's loser simply because not enough words start with it is pretty disingenuous. This obsession with nouns also results in a lot of rather obscure words being crammed into alphabet learning aids as well. Like, a xylophone is a pretty obscure musical instrument used mostly to play the theme to Monkey Island and not much else. Or how about a violin, which my research says is the word that children are most likely to encounter when learning about the letter V. How many kids come into contact with a violin?
Ladies and gentlemen, Benjamin Shapiro.
Or how about a queen, which is the most common Q word? I would argue it would make more sense to use words like quiet or voice, which children could reasonably be expected to be familiar with, rather than names of orchestra instruments or hereditary political leaders. But I guess it's hard to draw abstract concepts on kindergarten walls. Of course, it could be very easily argued that a lot of the objects we use to represent letters we don't really use for any reason beyond broad cultural tradition. Which is to say, A is for apple simply because we in North American culture, and perhaps British culture too, have just established this long tradition of teaching kids that A is for apple, and that's that. E is usually for elephant, not because we couldn't come up with a better or more relevant E word if we tried, but rather because over the course of the century or so that we have been making these ABC things, we have sort of slowly consolidated around a consensus that E should be for elephant. This tends to be how culture works. Things get normalized through repetition until we get to the point where we forgot why we started doing something in the first place. And this is my general takeaway from this whole alphabet object thing. It is more of a cultural tradition that we impose upon children than one with any clear or objective educational merit. I mean, don't get me wrong, it is obviously very important for children to learn their letters as soon as they can, but beyond fostering a sort of vague familiarity with the letters, basically everything useful a kid will eventually learn about the alphabet will come in spite of the very incomplete and flawed education he receives from one of these things. I shouldn't slag on English too much, of course. Pretty much every other language teaches their alphabet to children through this letter-object system too. And from what I can tell, the problems inherent in trying to teach the alphabet this way are pretty common across all other cultures too. My favorite example of this is the Swedish alphabet posters, which often have nothing at all for the letter Q, because in Swedish there are basically no nouns at all that begin with Q. So hopefully you can see what I mean about how this kind of thing leaves you with a somewhat flawed perception of the relative importance of various letters. Anyway, I hope you guys find this topic as interesting as I do, because I'm thinking about getting you guys to help me out with a new crazy project. I know you guys really like mailing me stuff from all your different countries of the world, and I like getting it. By the way, reminds me I have a huge backlog of packages I still have to open. So I was thinking it would be cool if you guys could mail me fun alphabet things from your country. Nothing fancy, just maybe like a placemat or a baby book or something like that. The more stereotypical, the better. And once I get a few of them, I could do a follow-up video in which we could look at some of the weird objects that different countries of the world use to represent their letters. If that sounds interesting, drop me an email and I will send you my mailing address. Or if that seems like too much work, maybe you could just leave me a comment in the thing below telling me what is the most stereotypical useless letter in your language according to the letter object system. What letter is the hardest to use to start a child-friendly noun? And what is the lame go-to object that always winds up being used for it as a result? What is your culture's xylophone, in other words? If you enjoyed this video, please do not hesitate to give that little thumbs up button a click. And also click that little bell buddy so you never miss the breaking news of when I post another YouTube video. See you all next week. Man, we're getting close to 100,000 subs, eh?